Winston-Salem's budget is a document that guides the spending of more than $350 million annually. The process to produce a budget begins this month. In this month's edition of the East Ward Update, you'll hear about some of the items in the budget, the impact of recent General Assembly actions, and you'll hear ways you can be involved in the process. I'm Durham Montgomery, council member of the East Ward. Welcome to the East Ward Update. The budget process for the city of Winston-Salem is underway. The city manager will bring a proposed budget to council later this month. My fellow council members and I will review it, propose changes, and hear from you before we vote on it in June. I'm joined today by Assistant City Manager Ben Rao and Trevor Minor, our Budget and Evaluations Director, to discuss it. Well, thank you all for joining us today, and we're excited about this process where we are now in beginning the budget process. And so, Ben, will you first introduce yourself, and then Trevor, just introduce yourself, and we'll get right to the nitty-gritty of it all.
Good morning, Councilmember Montgomery. My name is Ben Rao. I'm one of the Assistant City Managers for the city. I oversee the Budget and Evaluation Office, the Information Systems Department, the Winston-Salem Fairgrounds, the Convention Center, Bowman Gray Stadium, and our Property and Facilities Management Department.
Good morning, Councilmember Montgomery. My name is Trevor Minor. I'm the Budget and Evaluation Director. Actually coming up on my first year here, and it's been a very exciting time so far. Glad to be here.
All right. So where are we now, Ben? What is happening right now in reference to the budget?
Well, that we're very close to having a balanced budget proposal ready to go forward later this month to the mayor and the city council. Back in March, we provided the mayor and the city council a kind of a preview of what we were looking at, and at the time we were facing a gap in the budget of about $800,000. Proposed some ideas for about how we might go about closing that gap. The goal here being not to raise taxes for operations, but to try to manage our budget within our means, the revenues that we estimate, so that we can maintain the current level of service.
And so what are some of the things we're looking at right now in reference to the budgeting itself in terms of dollars and cents? What are some of the things that's impacting the budget?
Well, probably one of the most significant impacts is the loss of $2.3 million in business privilege license fee that will come about as a result of state legislation that was passed last year. The North Carolina General Assembly passed legislation that basically eliminates the ability of cities and counties to levy a business privilege license fee for businesses to operate in the city. In terms of the impact to our general fund, that is about $2.3 million. So we've had to prepare a budget knowing that that revenue really isn't going to be here. And so our focus has been to look very closely at the revenues that we do have coming in, property tax, sales tax, utility franchise taxes, but then focus on the expenditure side and to make sure that, that we are operating efficiently and that we're looking very closely at our expenses to make sure everything is justified. We're looking at making adjustments to the expenditure side of the budget to kind of help us stay within our means. That's the first goal. As I mentioned a minute ago, our goal is to not have a tax increase for operations. Now the budget will include a property tax increase of 2.5 cents for to pay off the bonds that were approved by voters in November of 2014. That's something that had been discussed leading up to the bond referendum, and that we've continued to share with the council and with constituents since then. So there would be a 2.5 cent increase to pay off the bonds, but no tax increase for operations.
And so in looking at the budget as a whole and looking at the fact of the loss of that revenue, what's different, if anything, for you besides that loss of revenue as you look at this budget compared to some of our budgets in the past?
Well, actually, over the last few years, we have been presented with some challenges from the General Assembly, going all the way back to, I guess, fiscal year 13-14, when the city lost the hold harmless payment that the state had been providing us to basically offset the impact of losing reimbursements that the state had been providing to us. That was the first really kind of impact there. That was almost a $2 million impact. Then the current fiscal year that we're in, the General Assembly basically made non-taxable what's called custom software. So any software systems that businesses have developed for their specific business processes, that's no longer taxable. And that was about $300 to $400 million in our tax base that basically became non-taxable. That was equivalent to another $2 million. And now we have the business privilege license fee. That's about $6.7 million in impact over the last few years that we've tried to manage. We have increased taxes to offset some of that. In addition to what has happened to us, there is legislation going through the General Assembly that would change how sales tax revenues are distributed. There's an effort to change the allocation from basically the current system of it being distributed on a point of sale basis to being a per capita basis across the state. And our initial calculations show that we could experience another $2 million impact from that. Now that legislation is still very much being, I think, debated and refined, but right now we're kind of preparing for the worst. So altogether, between what has been approved by the General Assembly and what is pending, I guess you could say, that's about $9 million in total impact to the city budget, which is equivalent to a little over 4.5 cents on the tax rate.
And some people may ask the question, well, how is all of this able to happen? How do you lose these revenues? Just for the public's sake, we have to acknowledge the fact that all cities and municipalities across the state are creatures of the state. And so we are at the will of the state when it comes to some revenues, particularly specified in legislative, meaning that if it is not specifically enumerated in documents passed by the legislature, we can't use that as a revenue source. And so those things that are specifically stated by state legislature as law is what we get to use as revenue as local municipalities and cities across the state.
That's absolutely correct.
And so as we sit in this place and we begin to come now facing this budget at this time, what are some of the key areas of our budget where we spend our money? Where does the city of Winston-Salem spend its dollars?
Well, if you look at the general fund, which is the fund that really accounts for our core municipal services, police, fire, sanitation, street maintenance, recreation, that budget typically is around $179, $180 million a year. Most of our tax revenues do go into that fund. And of that budget, probably over half of it is focused on public safety. Those are the two areas, fire and police, where we have the most personnel. And so there's a lot of resources focused to those areas. But we do have funding for sanitation for all the various sanitation services we provide, our weekly refuse collection, our recycling program, our yard waste and brush programs, and then with our transportation area with signs, signals, pavement markings, street maintenance, and then with recreation and parks, maintaining our parks and our recreation centers. So it's really focusing on those core services. We have other funds that account for other important city operations like the water and sewer system and the public transit system. In terms of where most of our tax dollars go, it goes into the general fund. Some tax dollars do go into the debt service fund, as I had mentioned earlier, about paying off our debt, our general obligation bonds. And then also a portion of the tax does go to our transit authority to support our public bus system and transportation for elderly and disabled residents.
And then on the other side of looking at those areas of pockets of dollars that are expended, many people look at the budget and they'll say a budget is our guiding document for our year. It really is. It looks at the focus areas in terms of where we spend our money. And particularly, these are taxpayer dollars. And they very much look at the quality of service that is being provided to them. They look at what is this meaning for? What am I getting for the tax dollars that I'm spending? And there's that balance that has to be had in reference to being efficient and effective in the services that are being provided. And from a budgeting standpoint, in terms of just looking at the numbers itself, what is some of the dilemmas that you all face just from a budgeting standpoint in trying to make sure we're both efficient and effective in that standpoint?
However you want.
Yeah, I'll do it. You always want to look and try to find out how your dollars are appropriated and what is the level of service that the citizens feel is sufficient for them, basically making sure you're getting the value for your dollar. And one way we do that is we do track performance measures. We ask departments by year, what are you doing? What is the result that you're achieving? how are you measuring, how are you tracking, is there a better way to do it? So we actually do keep that information and try to improve. We look at other municipalities to see how they're doing. Is there someone doing something better, more efficiently or more effectively than the city of Winston-Salem? And if someone is doing that, we want to find out why. And we ask and we inquire. There's a project throughout the state called the Benchmarking Project, where all municipalities and counties get together, send data to the Institute of Government on certain types of measures, like it could be refuse collection, bulky item collection. How much does it cost? And how are you doing? How many tons are you collecting? So that is one way that we do that. Consistent basis.
Some of the things I hear from constituents on a consistent basis, things that I hear that are important, like fire, police, protection, garbage, brush, and those kind of things. When those things don't happen in ways that people want them, like if they don't see the police at the time and that they want, or if there is items that are left out on the street for a long extended period of time and those things aren't picked up, there's oftentimes that question of the paying for services and feeling like you're receiving the services that you're paying for, and that balancing act that has to be had by staff and those within the various departments in order to provide those services in an equitable basis across the city of Winston-Salem. And it's a challenge, to say the least, to make sure that those services come out across the board, taking limited resources to be able to execute this big job that staff has each and every day to provide the services back out to the citizens of Winston-Salem. And as we're in this place, and people may ask the question about, looking at things that are happening, the question about the bonds. And how does that impact? I know we've talked about the 2 cents that are being added to the taxes for the bonds and debt services, but some may want to know, well, how is that going to impact the rest of the budget besides what we're going to pay the debt services? How does that have any implications on the budget as well?
Well, eventually, when the projects are built, and then our commitment is to move very quickly on building all of the projects that have been funded out of the $139.2 million. We know that there will be new facilities that will be coming online, and that there will be an operating impact of those facilities that will have to be maintained. Perhaps in some cases there will have to be some staffing to support them, and so we will start to look at more closely what those operating impacts will be. But our goal every year going into the budget process is, what can we do to maintain the current level of service without asking taxpayers to pay more for it? Mm-hmm. So our first goal is always maintain our current level of service, and what can we do on the expense side in order to ensure that we can do that. And then, when we've had situations like the last couple of years with state legislation, something that we really have no control over, then in those cases, the goal to maintain the current level of service, if need be, then staff will go to the mayor and council and say, well, because of this extraordinary circumstance with state legislation, we're going to need an adjustment in the tax rate in order to be able to maintain our current level of service. But as far as the bond projects go, we're going to be looking more closely at those as those projects start to go under construction, and position ourselves to incorporate whatever operating impacts some of those projects will have into our operating budget.
And as we get ready to shift bases just a little bit here, before we do that, what are, and either one of you all can chime in on this one, in terms of as we look at the budget itself, what are some key highlighted areas that you think the public should just be aware of, and just in terms of where some allocations are, some potential dollars that could be shifted, some new things or some things that could be taken away? What are some things on those areas that you think is important for just the broader community to see, understand, and know? And I think they should pay attention to the whole budget, but are there some highlights that you think they should just be aware of?
Some items that I think that the public should definitely be aware of, and it's something that's not probably seen by the general public, but it's there and it impacts the level of service that they receive, this year we are looking at possibly equipment upgrade for some of our public safety, police, fire, things of that nature that helps enhance the level of service that they receive as a general public. So I think that's one piece that they would definitely need to look at. Something else.
I mean, I think in addition to that, something that we had shared back in March with the council, really some additional investments in the area of public safety. If you look at fire, I think we're going to propose adding 3 new positions in fire. They're basically safety and training captains. So to really increase their efforts in more internal training. Also to make sure that at an incident scene that they have sufficient supervision there to ensure the safety of the firefighters and of course those who might be affected by the incident. Also proposing to add a position in our city attorney's office that would be focused on nuisance abatement, really addressing locations that have caused some challenges in areas of the city that we might be able to address and perhaps deal with the activity in some of those locations. But then also additional training, basically additional training for police and fire. Under federal guidelines now out of the Department of Justice, we're going to see the amount of federal forfeiture funds that we receive decrease, and our police department uses a lot of those funds for training, so we're going to shift some of those costs into the budget so we can still continue to train our police personnel. So a real focus there. As Trevor mentioned, we are trying to invest more in equipment replacements. We know that we're probably a little behind on replacing some of our equipment, so you'll see more replacement of police pursuit vehicles, fire trucks, but we also are trying to address needs in our public works areas, so sanitation trucks, probably replacements in our transportation department.
All right. And I think that all those items are very important to our citizens and for them to understand where we are and what we're doing. But then as they see those pieces, there may be other things that they think of that they want to be a part of the conversation and add to that. And so when we come back, we'll be able to have a little bit more conversation exactly on that. When we return, we'll talk about the council's budget workshop that allows you to participate in the process.
Open the door.
Open the door.
Open the door.
Fair housing is for everyone. If you think you've been discriminated against, call 311 and ask for the Winston-Salem Human Relations Department. Fair housing, it's the law.
Welcome back to the East Ward Update. I've been talking with the city's budget director, Trevor Minor, and the assistant city manager, Ben Rao, about the city's budget and the budget process. We've talked a little bit about the budget and the budget itself, and now we want to talk just a little bit more about what's going to happen next, the process of the budget, and how can individuals get engaged in that actual process. So how does this start? What's going to happen next?
We've actually already had the budget update, which occurred on March the 30th to City Council. The next step is the Thursday, May 21st distribution of the proposed budget to the mayor and the City Council. From there, we move on to Thursday, May the 28th, where we have our first Finance Committee workshop and also a budget overview and highlights. And that takes place in the Council Committee Room. And all citizens and public, it is open. After that, we have our Tuesday, June the 2nd Finance Committee workshop. There we'll discuss the capital plan and overview and highlights, and that's also in the Council Committee Room. On Thursday, June the 4th, there's a public hearing, the Finance Committee, and that's in the City Council chamber. That's where you will have citizens that are available to make comments and also listen to the proposed budget and the council's adopted budget as they're working through that process. May, June the 8th, the Finance Committee workshop, consideration of the recommended budget and property tax rate. And again, that occurs in the Council Committee Room. On Monday, again, June the 8th, Council Committee Room will also discuss the public safety items there, and that's with the Public Safety Committee. We'll review budgets such as police, fire, and emergency management. On Tuesday, June the 9th, it's the Finance Committee workshop. It's just an additional meeting if that meeting is needed. Finally, on Monday, June the 15th, is the regular council meeting, and that's where there'll be another public hearing and the budget adoption at that time. And that is also in the City Council chamber. That is the process, and those are the dates. And those should be highlighted on the budget webpage.
It'll be included on the city
And the city.
website, all of those dates. And all of the committee workshops are open to the public, so folks can come and listen to the Finance Committee, work through the budget document and the city's capital plan. And there are 2 public hearings, as Trevor mentioned. There's the Finance Committee public hearing, and then there's the really statutorily required public hearing that the full council will hold on June 15th. So in addition to that, the city does have a citizen feedback line that we can open up to allow folks to either email or call in suggestions regarding the budget. So there will be a number of opportunities for citizens to provide input to the mayor and the city council.
And I know one thing is very good in terms of having that citizen participation. Sometimes the citizens may think that everything's already worked out and is already a done deal, but the fact is that it's very much a living document until it's adopted by council. Things can change, things can shift until we actually get to the place and that document is actually adopted and approved by council. So I do want to encourage community from all over to make sure that if you have anything as this budget comes forward to be a part of the conversation, feel free to make sure you participate in any of the ways that have been outlined so far, because that's how we are able to make sure that we're developing something that meets the needs of the citizens. We think we have a good idea and a good thought, but only when we hear from what's happening in the community. And that's why I do also during the time of the budget a special town hall meeting where we go out in the community and have a presentation out in the community where individuals can hear about those things, ask questions, and sometimes there's information there that I glean and hear that's able to be brought back to the table in discussion when we're still in the process of working through the document before we get back to that full council vote. And so there's several levels, several places that individuals get to be a part of that process and hear what's happening and then influence the decision-making process, which I think is important for a community to understand and to know. This is a hefty task for staff to continue on working on an annual basis. I know that during this time and during this season, this may be the time where hair gets pulled out and you need extra caffeine and coffee to make it through the day. But we say thank you for the hard work and dedication that both of you all do and your staff do to help develop something, and then on an ongoing basis through the annual basis, well, not just annual, but through the monthly basis in terms of looking at where we are, how we're working towards making sure we're meeting the budget and staying on budget in that process, and then looking at opportunities to continue to do the work. Because I think sometimes council can come in with some thoughts and ideas, and it's the staff has to go and sometimes find ways to make things work. And that is all at the end of the day for the benefit of the community that we serve. At the end of the day, it's all about making sure that the citizens of the city of Winston-Salem receive high quality services, being effective and efficient with the dollars that they provided through their taxes. And so on behalf of my constituents, I thank you all for the hard work you do. And we're just at the very beginning piece of this consideration part where council will be a part of it, but there's been a lot of work already done by staff. And so we say thank you for that process.
Thank you, Councilmember Montgomery.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us for the East Ward Update. You can see this show in its entirety on the city's YouTube channel, Winston-Salem Gov. Thank you for watching.